Happy Wednesday, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Ashley Falls, Director of Clio Entertainment. Let me introduce Jesse Garrettson, Associate Director of Clio Entertainment, who leads this programming initiative. Hey, Jesse.
Hey, Ashley, and hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and tuning in. We're thrilled to have Ric Thomas with us here today. Ric is a trailer editor at Buddha Jones with over 15 years experience in the international film marketing industry. He's here today to share with us the 5 tenets of international trailers. We can't wait to hear what Ric has to say, so let's have him join us.
Hi guys, how's it going?
Hi, Ric. How are you doing? Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
We are just can't wait to hear what you have to say, so we will throw it to you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Hi everyone. My name's Ric Thomas, and I've been a trailer editor for about 15 years. And I love trailer editing. It's my ideal job. For me, trailers are really the distillation of editing, taking hours of footage and dailies and rushes and distilling it down to anything. Now we work on digital spots, anything to like 5 seconds. Currently, as the guy said, I'm working in LA, but I've also worked in London and New York, between international and domestic film marketing. And I'm here to talk about international trailers, which I did a lot of in London. And it's a kind of important thing to talk about because the international market is so important, especially now, during COVID, as the theatrical landscape kind of changes and evolves. Distributors, studios, and theatre chains are working out how the theatrical experience is going to change. The international market used to be 50%. It used 50% domestic and 50% international. A few years ago, it was 70-30. And who knows what that's going to look like in the future. In 2019, the international box office was 31 billion, crossing 30 billion for the first time. And that was to do with things like the increase in Asian markets like China. And now, obviously, the global disruption in the way we're seeing movies is going to change that as well. For a long time, London was the international outpost for a few of the major studios after the success of Titanic, where, international was a huge part of that release. Once the studios realized the importance of international and how things were going to go there, as more of the world emerged as key markets, the question was kind of raised by them to will one campaign work for everyone? So that leads me to my first point, which is, what are international trailers? And I ask that question because international trailers are often met with a lot of confusion, especially kind of domestically. It says it's international, but they're speaking in English. I'm watching it on YouTube, it's not translated. The trailers on the surface don't necessarily seem to be that different from a story point of view or something. You had the Men in Black International trailer that came out a couple of years ago, and you had the hilarious phenomenon of the Men in Black International trailer. If the craft, storytelling, and ultimate aim of the piece of marketing is the same, then how are they different? And the thing is, these trailers aren't necessarily for the people watching every bit of content on the internet, breaking them down frame for frame, watching every trailer. These trailers are for international markets, people who may see them in theatres and only be aware of one film that's coming out that year. And these international pieces have been cut and tested and tweaked to the point where they just work better for other countries. With that said, though, there are still big similarities in how they're put together. As a trailer editor, you still try and reflect the films. Storytelling is the most important thing of what we do. You start an international trailer the same way as any trailer. You reflect the film tonally. You see where the industry is going. But accepting all of that, there are a lot of differences and things you have to bear in mind when crafting these pieces for international. So here are my 5 tenets of international movie trailer advertising. And number 1 is that you have to be aware of cultural sensitivities. Are there cultural reasons for something to be marketed in a different way. Do audiences, international audiences, traditionally react to a different kind of tone? Something more dramatic, something more comedic? What is the taste of particular countries? These are obviously broad generalizations, and things are a lot more nuanced. Countries aren't some big homogenized place where everyone thinks the same. And yet people do react to certain things and ways of storytelling. Traditionally, Japan wanted everything to be a dramatic, epic romance with dramatic music and high stakes. So you take Frozen 1, for example, that was marketed domestically. There was a funny teaser with Olaf the thing. It was all very kind of light and fun. Whereas in Japan, Frozen 1 was marketed like this.
新たなる女王の誕生です。エルサ女王。
私に近づかないで。エルサ姉さん。
これは女王の呪いか。
私が姉さんを助ける。
一体何が起こっているんだ。
ただの吹雪じゃない。姉さんの魔法よ。
And actually, that trailer is very similar to the brilliant teaser trailer for Frozen 2. So clearly, Japan were onto something. There was a thing when I was working in London for Germany, for comedies for Germany, you would traditionally do the kind of lower brow sex jokes, although maybe everyone just kind of goes for that now with those kind of comedies. But you know, you would definitely have a spot that did that. There are other details you learn working in international from their clients, their representatives in different territories. Certain gestures, certain types of characters may be offensive. Also, laws vary. Are there legal restrictions on what you can say and show? In the UK, for example, you have to show people wearing seatbelts, even if it's a car without seatbelts. So you might have to draw those in graphically or cut those shots out. A big thing for years was, can you show guns to screen? In various territories, that's okay, that's not. I've had to do different versions of spots where, you know, it ended with a gun shooting to screen, and then you had to do a version for different territories where you swap just that shot. Behavior seen as repeatable by kids varies by different countries. You have different spots that air at different times, so it may be, you may have kind of harder content for a later in the day spot. You can't show smoking, you can't swear. So for example, in Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man goes from domestically being a dickwad to internationally, you'll see in the clip.
Who is that guy?
He's like Iron Man and Thor rolled into one.
He's no Spider-Man.
What is it with you and Spider-Man?
What, he looks out for the neighborhood, has a dope suit, and I really respect him. Sup, dickwad?
What is it with you and Spider-Man?
What, he looks out for the neighborhood, has a dope suit, and I really respect him. Sup, loser?
He is a loser. And I don't know whether that's because the insult doesn't translate or that it was too rude for certain territories. But either way, that's also a great example of the kind of cheating that sometimes we have to do in trailers where, you know, you'll cut away to get the loser line because obviously that's a line that's been recorded later and changed. So kind of subtle changes like that, as well as slightly more kind of interesting ones. While we're talking about Spider-Man, there was actually a point in the Captain America Civil War trailer where Tony Stark calls for Spider-Man and he says, "Underoos!" And I'm quite up on my domestic references. I was working in London at the time, but you know, I'm very kind of ingrained in American culture, and I didn't get the reference. And I said, well, is he saying on the roof? I didn't really get it. And then I Googled underoos, which sounded like what he was saying, and it turned out that it was underwear. Either way, it's an American reference that I didn't get. And you have to kind of think about whether that kind of thing is going to translate. And to that point, you know, sometimes international trailers do make things less American. You have a film like Pitch Perfect 3, where the Bellas are going out on a USO tour, but internationally, it's just a tour. Not that there's necessarily anything negative or kind of negative attitudes towards America. It's just something that is less of a sell, where obviously domestically, you know, that's something you want to kind of lean into. And my final point on cultural sensitivities is there something local that could be a boon to the marketing? You know, the same guy who's voiced Tom Cruise for the last 30 years? For Top Gun Maverick, do you want him out, you know, behind the scenes pieces of that guy? Him doing radio interviews, things like that. Is a local artist making music for that film just in that territory? Look at the DC fandom that just happened. You had these amazing pieces, and then different local presenters for each territory depending on where you were watching it. So, you know, kind of really leaning into, it's not just, hey, here's the domestic thing, you have to take it. It's kind of recognizing the cultural references there. Okay, and so my second tenet of international trailers is kind of to that point, making them accessible. Or rather, how can you create them to work better for these different markets? You have to consider the context of how they're being shown. Do certain markets need different types or lengths of materials? One key thing is that international trailers should generally be shorter, under 2 minutes. Foreign distributors, a lot of them like more trailers to play in a, you know, 5 2-second 2-minute trailers instead of 4 2.5-minute trailers, and then maybe you have a longer piece that goes online. 10 years ago, I was cutting 5-second TV spots for Russia. Coincidentally, while we're talking about cultural sensitivities, a place that responds really well to action traditionally. Also, are there story considerations where trailers have to be less nuanced, take less risks? Sometimes they have to be a bit more straight down the line, a bit less singular, a bit less cool. Take music, for example. A lot of recent trailers with cool, edgy music choices became slightly more conventional in international films like Bumblebee, Gemini Man. If you look at the international trailers, it's a bit more obvious what they are. Talking about story, do international audiences need a bit more context? You know, you look at the brilliant campaign for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you've got these amazing domestic pieces that are kind of mood, tonal pieces. It's the new film from Tarantino. That's kind of all you need to know. It's got Brad Pitt, Leonardo DiCaprio, Margot Robbie. Looks great. You look at the international trailer for that, it has a bit more context, a bit more story. It's not okay for them to just be living their cool 60s lives. There needs to be a bit more of a sense of story there. And to that point, people may not pick up kind of references, you know, something with an iconic TV character from kids' TV, Scooby-Doo, Sonic the Hedgehog, Dora the Explorer, Transformers. With domestic, you can just kind of launch into the fun and rely on people's prior knowledge. But internationally, you might have to do a bit more work. You know, maybe that character didn't break through in that territory. So maybe you have to kind of reintroduce them and say, hey, this character, this is this character, and this is what they do, and this is the kind of adventures they go on. And similar concessions to that take me to my third point. And this is, I think, for me, probably the biggest thing that emerged out of international marketing, and it's language. How do you adapt your materials to play in territories with different languages? Do you use voiceover? Do your graphics have to be simpler? Do you have to cut slower to allow for dubbing or reading subtitles? Do your copy, jokes, and references translate? Trailers are traditionally very quick. There's no dead air, especially when you get to a TV spot. Something can be happening audio-wise at any one time, or something should be happening audio-wise. You've got a line, a TV spot, a lyric poking through. Traditionally, international trailers should be slower. And the reason for this is when you've got cards to read, subtitles, you need more time to absorb what you're hearing and seeing. Also, even when dubbed, certain languages take longer to say things. Often the dubbing artist will have to speak ridiculously fast to fit the lines in, especially when you've got like an Apatow comedy where people are kind of rolling the lines off. If your characters are already speaking fast, it can get more difficult. Also, subtitles suck. People don't like to read. It's a simple fact. You know, that applies to copy cards as well. International trailers, therefore, should generally have voiceover. Voiceover kind of died out domestically as people found new ways to tell the story, you know, organically through the film. Obviously, it's a big thing still in TV where you can kind of use the clarity and conciseness that you get with voiceover to tell a story. So check out these two different trailers for Grown Ups 2 that I worked on.
Remember we used to come here after we got wasted.
What's wasted?
When you have a hankering for ice cream.
Well, I want to get wasted. I want to get totally wasted. I want to get chocolate wasted.
A few years ago, some old friends shared an unforgettable weekend. This year, they've moved back to their hometown.
Excuse me for a second. I think your mother's here and she looks angry.
So that might be the only appearance of an Adam Sandler film on an official Clio presentation, or indeed a deer peeing in someone's face. But the point being that, you know, the international audiences needed a bit more context. It wasn't okay to just hinge on the last movie. You know, you needed that voiceover. You didn't want the card that you were having to read. So they were kind of done in a different way. And to that point about reading cards, when you do graphics, they should be simpler. You know, we do amazing graphics. It's one of the ways that we can put our stamp on the film. But when you're translating that to 500 territories, you're amazing in situ graphics that are all rotoed and 3D and take hours to render. It's not necessarily going to work. They should be simpler, because they're going to have to be translated, and they're going to have to be adapted, and maybe therefore there should be less of them as well. Also, another point on language is, do jokes translate? Will the audience in Barcelona or Beijing get that reference? It's actually one of the reasons that there's less and less theatrical big budget comedy, because jokes don't necessarily translate. Typically, physical humor goes across better. You know, Seth Rogen sitting on an airbag on Neighbours and blowing up to the ceiling is hilarious wherever you are. Unfortunately, fart jokes play really well wherever you are as well. But also, you have a movie like the Lego Movie 2. It's from the guys who did 21 Jump Street. The dialogue is brilliant. It's overlapping. It's hilarious. You know, you've got puns and things like that. But when it comes to international territories, chances are maybe you have to hinge a bit more on the kind of physical side of the humor. So it's a bit more immediate and a bit more of a sell, because we are all children, ultimately. Also on language, and this is my favorite point, is does the copy work? You know, Captain Marvel came out a couple of years ago, had amazing copy, graphically as well. You know, discover what makes her a hero, and the her changed to a hero, and it was just beautiful. Question is, did that work internationally? There's a story that J.K. Rowling, when she wrote Harry Potter, there was the anagram in there where it went from I am Lord Voldemort to Tom Marvolo Riddle, and it caused publishers headaches because they had to kind of translate and find ways for it to work in both contexts, but also be an anagram. So that kind of wordplay becomes really difficult when you're talking about 50, 60, 70 languages. Check out this trailer. This is, I still think, you know, 5 years later, this is just probably the world's best copy.
Which car are we taking?
Not that one.
Oh my God. Oh God.
That copy is just so brilliant and specific to the English language, I think. So internationally, you have this.
Ahora que estás dentro.
No estoy dentro.
Lo sé, pero ellos creen que sí.
Pero no estoy.
Es uno de esos casos en que la gente ve una cosa aunque sea otra.
¡Fuera! ¡Estoy fuera!
So, yeah, saving the world takes a little heart and a big Johnson becomes one man is not enough to save the world. So it's still good, but you've lost that kind of extra level of clever wordplay. And while we're talking about things that are clever, that brings me to my next point. What can cut through the noise and get your film attention in that market? If the domestic campaign has set the template, what can you do internationally to make the film stand out? Can you be more irreverent? Are there local events or traditions you can reference? How can you innovate? often international marketing can fill a gap that domestic doesn't. Having worked in domestic now, you spend months and months creating the perfect trailer or TV spot that hits all quadrants and works for every single person and has been tested to the point where it tells that story and distills the story to a point where everyone kind of engages with it. But internationally, you can have a bit more freedom to fill the gaps. And this is a super important point as our industry kind of moves more towards social. You have more opportunities to hit less kind of broad concepts story-wise and more things. You know, hit national holidays, hit a spot for International Donut Day, focus on different characters, current events. I worked on Finding Dory, and it was while the Rio Olympics were on, and the swimming pool turned green because of the algae. So we cut a spot where the pool was turning green around Dory, and we kind of leaned into that, and that would have only been a spot that worked, that played in the UK. Anything you could do really to make that point, make those films stand out internationally. And to that point, brings me to my last point, what happens with the reverse of this? You know, what happens when you are in America in that domestic market and you become the international territory? How do you market world cinema domestically? How do you find that hook that will appeal to domestic audiences? And the answer is, for me, you use a similar tactic to what I was just talking about. You find an angle to cut through. You try and tie it to known quantities. You take a film like Fighting With My Family that came out last year. You have a British story, but you see it through the frame of The Rock, and you have a lot of material with him. You have WWE type footage to intro you, or you have a film like this, like Eddie the Eagle that came out a couple of years ago, and you have a spot like this.
Some of football's greatest heroes were recently invited to a special advanced screening of one of the most inspirational films in years, Eddie the Eagle.
The movie's amazing. You really see the importance of never giving up.
It's truly a remarkable story. If you love movies like Hoosiers, Rudy, and Remember the Titans, you should see Eddie the Eagle.
Doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter what you've accomplished, this movie shows it's never too late to be who you want to be.
Eddie showed the world, if you never jump, you'll never fly.
Eddie the Eagle, February 26th.
Great example there of taking a film that didn't have any kind of resonance domestically and finding a way to make it connect. And all of this is just going to be more important as the world continues to get smaller, which takes me to my last point, the future. What is the future? What will the international market look like in a post-COVID world? And to me, I think we really don't know. COVID has thrown everything we thought we knew, including a lot of what I've just talked about here, out the window. Recently, I saw someone say on Twitter, cinema isn't dying, it's just pivoted to Asia. You see films like The 800 make 20 times the US box office of that weekend because there wasn't really a US box office and China had opened up. And then you have things like Tenet, which is a really fascinating strategy. It opened at the end of August, took 53 million outside of the US while domestic wasn't open. It was a great success. People are adapting and changing their campaigns by the day. And aside from kind of release strategy, you have a thing where our tastes and what is cool becoming more global. Are we going full circle to a point where we have a global sense of cool and maybe we need less stuff targeted to specific international territories? And I think that kind of stuff is really exciting. But beyond that, I think that good characters and good story and good films and good content matters to people wherever they are. Good storytelling is universal, emotions are global, and now more than ever, especially in this year and these changing times. So thank you for listening.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Rick. Thank you.
I'm sure.
For being here. We really, really appreciate it. And that was fascinating. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you guys for the opportunity. And it's great. And I love trailers, and any chance that I have to talk about them, I'm more than happy. So thank you guys.
And thank you everyone for tuning in, and we hope you have a great day.